like I'm trapped in my damn mind. Tell the villain like I'm rapping a damn lie. Tell the villain like my life is a damn game.
Hey guys, today I'll show you an apocalyptic horror TV series named The Rain, Season 3. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The drama begins in the infection zone, where few human survivors remained after being quarantined for 6 years due to the rain virus outbreak, causing the infected area to become a desolate wasteland. However, outside the quarantine zone, the situation was also getting worse. A family hurriedly packed their belongings, running as if fleeing from disaster. The streets were already in chaos due to the spreading of the rain virus. The man tried hailing a car to leave this dangerous area, but he was soon hit by a coming bus. The scene shifts to Simone and her remaining group, who were still hopeful about the world beyond the quarantine zone. After an arduous journey, they reached the quarantine wall. There was a maintenance tunnel leading outside, and due to lack of guarding forces, the biotech company Apollon had abandoned this post. It was undoubtedly a golden opportunity to escape. Unfortunately, the majority of those present were infected with capsule viruses, and crossing the quarantine wall would trigger the virus and lead to their death. Only Simone and Phi, who weren't infected, had a chance to escape. Simone prepared to seek help outside the quarantine zone and then return to save her companions. Martin, always worried, gave Simone a tracking pendant so he could know her location at all times. After a heartfelt goodbye, Simone and Phi headed towards the maintenance tunnel alone. The dim, narrow passage was eerily quiet, with no guards in sight. But Simone felt something was off. As they carefully crossed the tunnel, a sudden alarm blared. A razor grid separated Simone and Phi. They knew they had triggered Apollon Company's defense system. Phi calmed herself, urging Simone on the other side of the grid to go ahead. Simone knew this wasn't the time to hesitate. She ran towards the tunnel exit. As expected, Phi was soon captured by guards, but they didn't pursue further, allowing Simone to successfully cross the quarantine wall. Upon seeing the transmission signal, Martin and the others were too excited to speak. Simone stepped out into the lush greenery beyond the quarantine zone, taking a rest. After half a year on the run, she had finally left the hellish virus quarantine zone. Following a path, Simone finally saw a house. The home was fully furnished, but there was no sign of people. Curiously, she turned on the radio. However, the broadcast left Simone's heart sinking. It said that the virus had spread outside the quarantine zone and caused big chaos. The broadcast urged people not to go to any emergency gathering points, as they had fallen too. Simone couldn't accept this reality. Wondering if that was the case, what difference was there then between the quarantine zone and the outside world? Despondent, she returned to the quarantine zone, only to run into the guards who had captured Phi. Simone excitedly questioned them if they knew the virus had already spread outside. They didn't respond, but told Simone that her brother, Raz, was looking for her. Upon hearing this, Simone was stunned. What she didn't know was that after their fallout, her brother had sought out Apollon's boss. He understood that the only person in the world who truly comprehended him was this man. Indeed, during the 3 months Raz lived at the Apollon Company, the boss gave him a significant position and understood his loneliness. He not only initiated a top-secret salvation plan, but also promised to help Raz find his sister. Simone learned from the guards that her brother was at Apollon headquarters. Without any hesitation, she got into the guard's car. She had been worried about her brother for months and was filled with guilt. Now that she knew where he was, she naturally needed to see him. Not far away, Martin was alerted by the tracking pendant that Simone had been captured by the Apollon guards. Although he was curious about why she had returned, he decided to go and rescue her. At this time, Simone was sitting in a car, traveling through the desolate highway to the last base of Apollon Company. After undergoing a series of virus checks, she finally met her younger brother. They stared at each other, their estrangement feeling stronger than the glass wall between them. Simone disclosed that the virus had also invaded outside the quarantine zone, and they needed to do something to rescue the world. Raz, however, did not seem surprised and mentioned that he was executing a world-saving plan. If everyone adapted to the virus, everything would return to normal, a belief exactly in line with the Apollon boss's philosophy. It seemed his manipulations over the past few months had been successful. However, Simone firmly believed that the virus was the root of all evil and must be completely eradicated. This disagreement caused another heated argument between the two siblings. Simone realized that her obedient brother she once knew was gone forever. Meanwhile, Martin and his group had arrived near the Apollon base. The place was heavily guarded, so a direct entry was impossible. Fortunately, Kira, who was once part of Apollon, quickly thought of a plan. She disguised herself as an Apollon guard, with Martin and Patrick posing as prisoners. They successfully tricked the gate guards. While on a vehicle heading to the base, they suddenly attacked the driver and took control. They then boldly drove into the base. Patrick, looking through the window, saw Phi walking into a tent and quickly jumped off the car with Martin. Kira, however, did not plan to join them. She intended to go deeper into the base to settle accounts with the Apollon boss. Martin and Patrick, blending in with the other survivors, did not arouse suspicion. They quickly arrived at Phi's tent and, while everyone was distracted, took down all the medical staff inside. However, Phi, who was 4 months pregnant with the late virus expert's child, brought forward her protest. She believed that staying here would provide the best conditions for her child and did not plan to leave with Patrick and the others. Martin, feeling anxious, rushed out to continue his search for Simone. Patrick understood Phi's intentions and prepared to leave. However, they encountered a guard. Luckily, Phi came out in time and claimed Patrick was the child's father, asking them not to harm him. As a result, Patrick and Phi ended up in the VIP room of the Apollon base. Regardless, the people there were very respectful towards pregnant women. The next day, Simone was led by a guard to a secret quarantine room full of survivors suffering from terminal diseases. They were voluntarily accepting the virus from Raz's body. If their bodies could adapt, not only would all their diseases disappear, but they would also be able to survive in this virus-infested world. Simone finally understood that this was her brother's so-called salvation plan. Moreover, the patients were very grateful to Raz, who had given them a glimmer of hope. However, Simone still believed that this method was wrong. To make the patients understand the truth, she brought them to her brother and started to tease Raz, saying that he was just being manipulated by the boss. This provoked Raz, and the virus inside his body burst out uncontrollably. The patients were shocked to see the true face of their hero, who looked like a spray monster. Simone took this opportunity to escape the room. She was soon pursued by the guards, but Kira appeared just in time to help her out. Simone didn't dare to linger and continued to run. However, the Apollon base was too large, and she was eventually cornered on a bridge. Seeing the pursuers closing in from both directions, Simone fell into deep despair. After whispering an apology to her brother, she resolutely jumped off the bridge. Martin witnessed the entire process from the floor-to-ceiling window, unable to suppress a mournful cry of distress. Even the arrival of the guards did not deter him. At the same time, Raz was expressing his own feelings of loss and anger. Surprisingly, when he woke up again, a woman quietly entered his room. On closer inspection, it was Sarah, the ailing sister of the virus expert. They embraced and performed a smelly hormone yoga. 2 minutes later, they finished, and Raz was curious because Sarah had clearly died. So why was she here now? It turned out that after she was shot, she had accidentally been infected by the virus from Raz. The powerful self-healing ability allowed her to be reborn. Raz suddenly felt that he could read Sarah's inner thoughts, likely due to the sensory sharing ability of the virus. Without Sarah having to speak, Raz could visualize her previous experiences. It's shown that Sarah had been saved by a kind-hearted person in the forest. While they were having dinner at home, a group of bandits suddenly broke in. The kind-hearted person was quickly killed, which thoroughly angered Sarah. She released the virus, killing all the bandits, and eventually arrived at the Apollon base. Raz was overjoyed by her arrival. He not only had a soulmate, but this also proved that the salvation plan was feasible. So he immediately introduced her to his boss. Unfortunately, after a long check, they couldn't find anything special about Sarah. But why could she adapt to the virus in Raz's body when others couldn't? As the staff wanted to ask more, Sarah became fearful, wondering if they were going to use her as a guinea pig. Seeing this, Raz quickly followed her to explain that they were doing this to find a way to adapt to the virus and save others. He then brought her to the experimental ward to prove that he was not lying. But as soon as they arrived, they simultaneously showed a look of utter shock. It turned out that the previous experimental patients had all become cold corpses. On the other hand, Simone, who fell into the river from a height of 100 meters, miraculously did not die and was even washed ashore by the torrent. When she woke up, she found herself lying on a bed. It turned out that the brother and sister in front of her had saved her from the river. Daniel, the brother, told Simone that her tracking device was broken and would take some time to repair. At this point, Simone was not concerned about this and quickly asked where they were. Daniel confidently told her that this place was isolated from the world. Simone was also very curious as to why the plants here were not infected by the virus. Luna, the sister, gave a mysterious smile and quietly led Simone to an open area. Unexpectedly, all the plants in front of them were infected. The clear divide was quite eerie. The little girl took out a bottle of liquid and dabbed it onto the infected plants. The black virus visibly receded at a speed visible to the naked eye. Simone was speechless with surprise. It was clear that the liquid in the girl's hands could eliminate the virus. This was why they were able to live in isolation here. Simone could hardly believe her own eyes. She asked what exactly this liquid was. Luna answered that the liquid was extracted from a certain flower. As Simone was about to ask more, a shout from Luna's family came from a distance. Luna panicked and ran towards her home. It turned out that not only did siblings Daniel and Luna live in this paradise, but their parents were also alive and well. Their father was very wary of Simone's presence, warning her to leave as soon as her injuries healed. He also scolded Daniel for casually bringing strangers home, as it could possibly expose their location. But Daniel was confused, wondering if he should just stand by and let someone die. Simone observed the cautious demeanor of Daniel's father and guessed they must be hiding a secret. Just then, she saw Daniel in a protective suit preparing to go out. She immediately followed him, watching him enter an abandoned factory. Consumed by curiosity, she followed him into a room, and the sight in front of her left her flabbergasted. A huge plant stood in the middle of the room, blooming with stunning flowers. Just then, Daniel suddenly appeared, loudly warning her not to approach the flower. But Simone was excited. She guessed the magical liquid came from this flower. Unexpectedly, Daniel's father also appeared and forcibly escorted Simone back, but she did not want to give up so easily. She told them about the virus in her brother's body and the imminent downfall of the world. She felt that this flower might completely eradicate the virus. Righteous Daniel volunteered a long-buried story. Before the apocalypse, Daniel, his girlfriend, and his family were on a caravan vacation. Just as they arrived at their destination, the terrifying acid rain came. At that time, Daniel's family was fortunate to escape the catastrophe in their van, while all other tourists died on the spot. Afterward, they did not dare to go anywhere and stayed in the van for several days. But Daniel's girlfriend couldn't stand it anymore and prepared to leave with some supplies. But she was caught by Daniel and his father. Scared, she ran away, and the father and son followed. They chased her to an abandoned factory, and to their surprise, when she entered a room, a scream of agony was heard, indicating she was beyond help. However, the infected plants miraculously returned to their original state. Thus, Daniel's family discovered the existence of the magical plant, ensuring that they lived virus-free for 6 years. Although Daniel, persuaded by Simone, began to have the idea to save the world, his father was clearly more extreme. All he wanted was for his family to be safe. So he pulled Simone outside, ready to silence her forever to ensure that the secret of the magical plant would not be exposed. Just when Simone thought she was done for, Daniel suddenly ran out and knocked his father down, giving Simone a chance to escape. But the father was closely following her. Anxious, Simone accidentally saw a bonfire ahead and found several children with bows and arrows. She quickly shouted for help. However, these people ran for their shitty lives after being scolded by the old father. When Simone felt deeply desperate, Daniel suddenly appeared for rescue with Kira and John. It turned out that when he was searching for Simone, he accidentally met Kira and John, who were camping outside. So they immediately ran over to rescue her. Seeing Kira holding a weapon, the old father had no choice but to put down his dagger. But Simone was always worried about the magical plant and planned to go back to get some virus flower liquid. However, they didn't realize that their movements had been noticed by someone. At this moment, Raz and Sarah at Apollon Base are staring in terror at the body before them, realizing they have all become sacrifices for experiments. Enraged, Raz confronts his boss, who surprisingly remains calm. He coolly states that those people were already destined to die, and now they are merely contributing to virus research. In the midst of their conversation, another patient dies from the virus injection, enraging Raz even further. Yet the boss remains unmoved. He believes that since Sarah can coexist with the virus, there must be a special reason. They must find the answer together. Hearing that, Raz calms down, but his resentment towards his boss deepens. Outside the base, a seemingly dying Martin is being dragged to the edge of a river by 2 guards. Unexpectedly, Martin suddenly bursts out in rebellion, breaking free and killing the 2 guards in surprise. He then proceeds to Patrick and Phi's room, takes down the guard at the door, and prepares to leave with them to find Simone. But Patrick believes that Simone, having jumped from such a high place, chances of survival are slim. This infuriates Martin, who is about to lecture him, when suddenly he hears voices from the corridor. It's Raz and his group. When Phi sees Sarah alive, she is so surprised she cannot close her smelly mouth and rushes forward to ask what happened. But Sarah's expression is indifferent. She still resents Phi for abandoning her earlier. However, Sarah provides vital information to the boss, saying that Phi knows her physical condition well and may unravel the secret to adapting to the virus. Martin is not so lucky. He is captured by the guards again. He knows he can hardly escape on his own, so he finds an excuse to approach Raz, asking him to let him out to find Simone. Raz quickly shatters Martin's hopes. He knows that Simone has a locator pendant, but the tracker cannot display her signal. He assumes Simone is likely dead. They have no idea that Simone's locator pendant is simply broken. Martin becomes desperate. He cannot imagine life without Simone. At this moment, he despises his own weakness, unable to protect the woman he loves. On the other hand, Phi quickly plunges into the research on Sarah. After scanning all the data again, she finally accepts Sarah's resurrection. Phi has taken care of Sarah for many years and knows her condition well. Combining this knowledge with previous virus data, she reasons why Sarah can coexist with the virus. It's because of her immune system defect. The virus didn't encounter any antibodies when it entered her body, thus becoming a part of it. Raz thinks this is quite possible, but he keeps his intentions hidden. He instructs Phi not to report to the boss yet. He decides to experiment himself first, not wanting Apollon Company to master this technology. The best candidate for the experiment is undoubtedly the disheartened Martin. Upon learning that receiving the virus experiment could grant him great power, Martin raised his interest. He thinks that if successful, he could get revenge on the Apollon Company, so he quickly agrees to be a test subject. Just as Raz had made up his mind, an abrupt incident forced him to reconsider. The boss informed him that their cancer patient wouldn't live much longer, and they had no choice but to subject her to the virus experiment. Raz knew that if they followed the usual method, the patient was doomed. He was torn, unsure whether to conceal the correct experimental method or not. Sarah, since gaining control over the virus, had evidently become somewhat arrogant. She urged Raz not to fret over such matters. If he was afraid of the boss finding out, he could simply get rid of him. Then, Raz would be the one calling the shots at Apollon Company. However, they were unaware that their every word and action were under the boss's scrutiny through surveillance. Naturally, the boss wouldn't sit idly by. He summoned Raz to his office and told him in a meaningful manner that, in a sense, Raz was his own creation. He knew the virus was fearful of fire. In the security footage, 2 guards were seen tormenting Sarah with a raging fire, and Raz was also in agony. The boss was well aware that due to the virus, Raz and Sarah had achieved a symbiotic relationship. With this upper hand, Raz had no choice but to obey him. Under the command of the boss, a special virus experiment began. After destroying patient number 1's immune system, Raz entered the lab preparing to initiate the virus invasion. Yet he was somewhat resistant, but the boss had a way to handle him. The searing flames approached Sarah again, and Raz had to comply. He waved his hands, and a large amount of viral mist invaded patient number 1's body. Everyone held their breath, waiting to witness a miracle. Unfortunately, even after 10 minutes, there was no response from the test subject. Just when the boss was about to switch to another individual for experimentation, patient number 1's hand moved. Then her eyes opened. It was clear that the experiment was successful. Everyone present was excited, especially Raz. He felt a mysterious connection with the patient. The boss asked Raz to get ready. He would personally conduct the next experiment. This was the real purpose of establishing the lab and cultivating Raz. If one could coexist with the virus, not only would they have powerful strength, but they would also be immune to various diseases. Suddenly, Raz felt a pain throughout his body and hobbled out of the lab. It seemed there might be some side effects from the virus transmission, but the boss could hardly care about that. He ordered Raz to start the experiment immediately. Meanwhile, Daniel, with Simone and others, came again near the antidote bead flower, preparing to show them its magical properties. This is a plant more fearsome than the man-eating Venus flytrap, but the juice it secretes is a potent antidote to the virus. Simone excitedly showcases its magical properties to her companions. Just a tiny drop can rejuvenate a large area of plants that have been contaminated by the virus. Even though they aren't sure what effects the juice might have on humans, Simone decides to try it on her brother Raz. It might be the only way to purge the virus from his body. However, the exact dosage needed is still uncertain. Simone decides to gather more of the juice, just in case, and asks John to stay behind and guard Daniel's family. The group arrives at the abandoned factory where the magical plant is located. Daniel warns everyone not to get too close, and he carefully begins collecting the plant's juice in a test tube. But when he collects the fourth tube, he accidentally touches the flower's stigma. All the petals immediately contract. He yells for everyone to run for their shitty lives as the contracting petals rapidly inflate, spraying countless virus-infected particles like bullets. Fortunately, Daniel and the others hide quickly and aren't harmed. However, they suddenly hear gunshots in the distance. Daniel senses trouble and rushes towards the direction of their vehicle. Upon arriving, he finds his father shot with an arrow. It turns out just a few minutes ago, his father in the car heard some noise outside and went to check. He saw several figures emerging from the woods, followed by several arrows flying towards him. He was instantly hit. Thankfully, John fired his gun in time, driving them away. However, Kira is still somewhat uneasy. She takes the weapon and decides to go into the woods to investigate. Sure enough, she soon senses something amiss. With a few quick shots, she brings down the shadowy figure. On closer inspection, she realizes the intruder is just a child. Kira is somewhat surprised, and at the same time, it quells her intention to pursue and eliminate the threat entirely. On the other side, Simone led Daniel's injured father into a room, intentionally raising her voice to distract him. Daniel seized this opportunity to pull out the arrow lodged in his body. After bandaging his wound, Kira returned from the woods, reporting that their adversaries were just a group of children. The old man turned serious upon hearing this, rebuking Kira for her soft heart, expecting their assailants to return. However, Kira and Simone didn't take it seriously. After all, they were just kids. They planned to leave the area first thing in the morning. Just then, Daniel approached them and pulled out Simone's location pendant, announcing he had fixed it. Simone gave him a sweet smile, hung the pendant around her neck, and pressed the start button, secretly wondering if Martin would come looking for her once he received the signal. Little did she know, her beloved Martin was about to face a problem. Inside the Apollon research base, Raz had finally mastered the correct operation method and successfully transferred the virus in his body to Patient 1. The boss was ecstatic, pressuring Raz to perform the same procedure on him. As the medication began destroying his immune system, he maintained an air of fearlessness. He wasn't worried about Raz playing tricks because Sarah was held captive by his men. However, not long after, Sarah appeared outside the lab. The boss became panicked, and Raz, no longer pretending, whispered to him that it was his time to die. It's then revealed that just minutes earlier, after treating Patient 1, Raz had taken advantage of a moment of pain to sneak into the room where Martin and Patrick were detained. After easily neutralizing the guard, he instructed them to rescue Sarah. Once everything was in place, he casually strolled into the lab. Seeing Sarah's appearance, Raz finally let his guard down. While the boss's immune system was still not completely destroyed, Raz lifted his hands and began to furiously transmit the virus to him. Within seconds, the source of all the disaster was dead and sent to meet his maker. After that, Raz's next step was to modify Martin so he could have enough manpower to take complete control of Apollon Company. Before the experiment began, Raz brought Patient 1 to reassure Martin, hoping to alleviate any concerns. Martin didn't care what happened to him anymore because Simone was gone from this world. Just then, Patrick in the bedroom heard an alarm from the receiver. He hurriedly checked it and was surprised to find Simone was alive. Knowing Martin was about to receive the virus transfer, Patrick rushed towards the lab, but he was a step too late. By the time he arrived, Martin was already enveloped in a black mist of the virus. With no other options, Patrick could only wait for the experiment to finish. Thankfully, the outcome was not bad. Martin did not exhibit any abnormalities, but instead felt an unprecedented power surge within him. Raz was also satisfied with this, for he had gained a powerful ally, giving him the confidence to confront the Apollon Company. Afterward, in front of all the executives, Raz declared that the boss was dead and that he was taking over as the new CEO of the company. He also stated that everyone present could become a new kind of human coexisting with the virus. To his surprise, there were dissenting voices. One person stood up and retorted that Raz was just a lab rat and never knew about science. Enraged, Raz didn't hesitate to kill the dissenter with toxic gas. This silenced everyone, effectively acknowledging Raz's new role as Apollon's CEO. Martin had learned from Patrick that Simone was still alive. He was here to bid Raz farewell, as he had to go and find his beloved as soon as possible. When Raz heard this, he was thrilled and planned to go with Martin. However, Sarah dissuaded him, reminding him that there were still many patients waiting for his help. Raz agreed and entrusted Martin to bring Simone back to the base as soon as possible, so she could witness the success of the new human project. Martin, however, had his own concerns. Given his virus-infected physique, he could no longer be with Simone unless she also underwent the virus experiment. With a mix of anxiety and anticipation, he set off once again to find his beloved. Meanwhile, Simone was about to bid farewell to Daniel's family, but she unexpectedly discovered that the little girl, Luna, was missing. Everyone was thrown into chaos, but despite their search, they could find no trace of her. Only John found Luna's shoes and inferred from a note left behind that Luna had been kidnapped and they needed to exchange food for her return. The father deduced that it must have been the work of those troublemaking kids. Indeed, he was correct. The ones who kidnapped Luna were a group of children holed up in an abandoned building. However, their leader was a middle-aged man with a large beard. It seemed he had had his eye on Daniel's family for some time. Knowing she was partly to blame for Luna's disappearance, Simone took it upon herself to undertake this mission. Together with Kira, John, and Daniel, they set off towards the kidnapper's lair. Based on the father's description, the culprits were holed up in the high-rise building ahead. After a painstaking approach to the foot of the building, they shouted that they had brought the food. To their surprise, they were greeted with several pieces of junk electronics falling from above. Simone and the others beat a hasty retreat, only to have arrows whizzing by them from a nearby location. Dodging and running, they came to a side door of the building, only to find it blocked by a large patch of poisonous plants. In the heat of the moment, Simone quickly threw out a tube of plant antidote, creating an instant safe passage. Without a second thought, they rushed into the building. To their surprise, it was eerily quiet inside. The kidnappers were obviously not here. Simone guessed they must be on the top floor. Many rooms were covered in poisonous plants, leaving no time for a thorough search. They could only ascend the stairs, floor by floor. However, when they were almost at the top, they found the stairway blocked by a railing. With no other choice, they went into the rooms to assess the situation. Thankfully, Kira noticed a trap set by the kidnappers in time. They began to search for clues to reach the upper floor. When Kira noticed footprints on a windowsill, an idea sparked in her mind. Eventually, they discovered a hidden ladder outside the window, which must be the only path to the upper floor. John, looking at the daunting height, was terrified and declared he couldn't climb. Simone didn't blame him. Instead, she was the first to grab the ladder and led the others upward. After a challenging climb, they reached the top floor, only to be dumbfounded by the absence of people. However, as they passed through a cross corridor, a large group of kidnappers emerged from various rooms, surrounding Simone and her companions. Having no other choice, they surrendered. Thankfully, the kidnappers weren't evil, and little Luna was unharmed. Simone took the opportunity to throw out a backpack full of food, indicating their sincerity to trade. To their surprise, the bearded leader flexed his big beard to show his dissatisfaction. He had seen Simone use the juice to eradicate the virus and recognized that this was the real treasure. With it, they could create pure soil to grow food. After discussing with her companions, Simone felt they could always collect more of the juice, but without Luna, all was lost. Moreover, the kidnappers were just a group of hungry children. Hence, an agreement was quickly reached. Simone handed over all the juice she had and promised to provide a tube to the kidnappers every week. This made the leader's sensitive beard very happy. He even offered to share his long-stored cola with everyone, which diffused the tense atmosphere. Simone got to know that the bearded leader wasn't really a villain. If it weren't for him taking care of this group of children, they might have perished a long time ago. But after she finished a can of cola, she felt something was off. The drink had been drugged. When she woke up again, she and her companions were trapped in a room, their calls for help unanswered. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed, and a large hole was knocked out of the isolation wall. It was John who had come to save them. They didn't have time to exchange pleasantries, let alone hormones. Upon reaching the living room, they found the kidnappers were nowhere in sight. They realized they must have gone to find the magical plant. Indeed, human greed knows no bounds. When Simone and the others saw Daniel's father bound up, it further confirmed their suspicions. They quickened their pace towards the abandoned factory. However, when they arrived at the scene, they all couldn't help but gasp. Lying on the ground were numerous corpses, each one in a pitiful state. They must have triggered the plant's defense mechanism while trying to extract its juice. For some reason, the plant was completely wilted, and it might be impossible to obtain the antidote juice anymore. Simone looked around in shock and found the bearded leader barely alive at the doorway. He was muttering that he just wanted to give the children some hope, and then he drew his last breath. Simone noticed a tube of medicine in his hand and took it from him. Fortunately, not all the children were killed. Kira found a survivor in the bathroom. After handling all the bodies, she decided to take in this poor child. Daniel's father was enraged by the wilting of the plant and blamed everything on Simone. This made Simone feel guilty, unable to say anything in her defense. However, she still had a glimmer of hope, the tube of medicine she got from the bearded man, which could potentially cure her brother's virus. Just then, a figure appeared in the darkness. It was Martin, who had also come to this place. But seeing Simone and Daniel's intimate appearance, he felt a bit upset and did not choose to appear immediately. Instead, he decided to meet Simone when she was alone. Seeing Martin, Simone could not hide the joy in her eyes. However, Martin was in a mixed mood. He hadn't forgotten his mission, to eliminate Raz. He told Simone about Apollon's boss's plan to cure terminal patients. He urged Simone to return and reunite with her brother. In fact, the siblings both intended to let everyone return to normal life, but Simone insisted on killing the virus instead of cohabiting with it. She also couldn't help but reveal the existence of the special plant. Although it had wilted, she still had a vial of medicine. Martin thought it was too risky to give the medicine directly to Raz, but Simone couldn't come up with a better solution. As a result, they parted ways again. Not long after she turned and left, Martin suddenly felt great pain. His body involuntarily emitted a large amount of poisonous gas. Obviously, the plant still had the effect of restraining the virus. After a night of contemplation, Simone decided to return to Apollon. No matter what, she wanted to give the antidote to Raz. When Daniel heard Simone was leaving, he was reluctant to let her go. He was just one step away from professing his love for her. Simone picked up on his feelings and had to bring up her boyfriend Martin to dispel Daniel's thoughts. Simone wanted to take her companions back to Apollon, but since Kira's most hated boss was dead, she felt there was no need to return. John also didn't like the atmosphere at Apollon, so the only ones who set off this time were Simone and Martin. After bidding a reluctant farewell to their friends, they embarked on another unknown journey. However, this time there was no sweetness or warmth as before. Martin deliberately kept a distance from Simone, fearing that he might infect her with the virus. The attentive Simone sensed something was wrong and kept reassuring him that no matter what happened, they would stick together. Martin was even more eager to return and hoped that Raz could persuade Simone to accept the new human plan. Little did he know, the so-called new human plan had developed a fatal flaw. Ever since Raz had transplanted the virus into Martin, he was preparing to go big. However, Sarah discovered that there was a wound on his neck that wasn't there before. Raz initially didn't care, brushing it off as a scratch. But when he went to the bathroom alone to check, he felt something was wrong. With the virus's strong, self-healing ability, it was impossible to leave a wound. But at this moment, he couldn't care less. The most important thing was to quickly complete the new human plan. There were many patients in the ward waiting for the virus transplant. The wound on his neck was like a huge stone in his heart, making him feel very uneasy. By the next day, a row of terminal patients was already in place. After their immune systems failed, Raz quietly walked into the lab and began transplanting the virus into them one by one. But when he got to the fourth one, Raz felt completely drained, even struggling to stand. Fi noticed the wound on his neck and realized something was wrong. She found Sarah, hoping she could persuade Raz to undergo an examination. Fi was worried about what kind of sequelae this virus transplant might have, but Raz stubbornly insisted that he was fine. Besides, the patients who received the transplant had already recovered. When Fi left, Raz changed his expression. He stated that he wanted Fi to be the next recipient of the virus transplant, because only in this way could she stand by his side. Martin was a good example. Even if he wasn't around, Raz could feel his every word and action. Fi was resistant to this. After all, she was pregnant. But living here, she had to comply with Raz's arrangements, which made her think of escaping again. The next day, when Raz woke up, he found another scar on his arm. This made him increasingly worried, even feeling it difficult to breathe. Even patient number 1 noticed these strange emotions. Raz didn't know how to explain and could only choose to avoid it, because the feeling of weakness was real. Sarah saw everything and couldn't help running to find Fi for help. Only she could figure out what was wrong with Raz. Fi, considering their years of friendship, couldn't refuse. She had to give up her plan to escape, find Raz again, and found that he was checking his body and even wanted to take some antibiotics. She thought this would only make things worse. Raz's body might not just have a symbiotic relationship with the virus, he must be thoroughly examined. Raz was a little panicked and finally agreed to Fi's request to check him, but asked her to keep the results confidential. Fi compared the blood samples from Raz and theorized that transplanting the virus to others could cause a backlash effect, which could eventually wear down Raz's body. Despite his insistence on secrecy, Phi couldn't hide anything from Sarah and was forced to reveal the test results. If Raz continued with the virus transplants, his life could be in serious danger. Sarah was taken aback and hurriedly ran to the lab to stop Raz, who was preparing to continue with the transplants. However, Raz didn't want to back down in front of so many people and planned to carry on with the new human plan. Left with no other option, Sarah grabbed the virus expert behind her and threatened Raz to stop immediately. After such a scene, Raz had no choice but to give in. Deep down, he agreed with Phi's conjecture because his body had already developed many new wounds. However, he was in a difficult position. There were still many terminally ill patients in the ward in need of treatment. He didn't think it was possible to admit that the new human plan was wrong. But before continuing, he had a few things to do. Phi knew about Raz's physical condition. To not induce panic among others, she had to be silenced, and the best way was to transplant the virus into her. Next was the troublesome Sarah. Raz tricked her into an isolation room and used his authority to lock the door, ensuring that Sarah couldn't get out in a short time. It seemed that Raz was determined to complete the virus transplants for the terminally ill patients. Meanwhile, Martin, on his way home, seemed to feel Raz's determination. The virus in his body flared up again. Fearing that Simone would discover his condition, he quickly ran into the distance. Unknowingly, he ended up by a river, hoping to wash off the virus from his body. But this was like a pipe dream. The virus in his body became even more active due to his agitation. When Simone woke up and found Martin missing, she started searching for him. Finally, she found Martin by the river, seemingly lost in thought. Thankfully, he had returned to his normal self and didn't show any signs of abnormality. However, Simone didn't notice that the grass patch where Martin had been squatting was clearly infected. Despite his best efforts to hide it, the truth couldn't be concealed. Martin happened to mention Sarah's resurrection, and Simone immediately felt something was wrong. What Raz was doing was clearly against the natural laws of life. This conversation angered Martin. His veins bulged as he argued, and Simone, in disbelief, realized that he was also infected with the virus. Martin tried to explain how good it felt to coexist with the virus and that Raz's ideas were right. But Simone didn't believe this. Was it the humans controlling the virus, or the virus controlling the humans? At this point, she knew it was pointless to argue further. She pulled out the only remaining antidote and forced Martin to make a choice: either drink the antidote or never see her again. Faced with such a difficult choice, the virus in Martin's body erupted uncontrollably. Simone was scared and stepped back, accidentally tripping and breaking the vial of antidote. When she got up again, she was surrounded by a thick mist. Martin tried his best to control the virus and not hurt Simone, but he knew he couldn't hold on for long. Seeing the spilled antidote on the ground, he made a choice. With all his strength, he picked up half a bottle of the liquid and gulped it down. The next moment, Martin's eyes bulged uncontrollably, and the spreading mist of the virus disappeared, but he began to convulse violently like a shrimp. Simone watched in horror as Martin convulsed. The antidote had only been effective on infected plants before. She didn't know what would happen if a human drank it. Simone ran to his side in panic. No matter how much she cried and shouted like a chicken, he remained motionless. Carrying regret and self-blame, Simone remembered the moments she had shared with Martin. Sadly, all the beautiful moments were now scattered with the wind. She finally took Martin's body back to the temporary camp, where everyone looked on with shock and confusion. The next morning, Martin was buried at the highest peak nearby. Despite their sorrow, everyone had to accept this reality. Just as Simone was contemplating what to do next, Daniel ran over exclaiming that the miraculous plant had revived. Simone rushed to the abandoned factory, and indeed, the plant was blooming vibrant flowers again. They discovered traces of the virus on the ground, all originated from where Martin had once stood. They speculated that the plant had absorbed the nearby virus, turning it into nutrients for its body. This was the true reason for its revival. In a sense, it was Martin who saved this plant. Simone couldn't help but smile with relief. Suddenly, several figures flashed outside the factory. Daniel ran out to check and was surprised to see Patrick and Phi. Simone was overjoyed to see her old friends and asked how they ended up there. But Patrick's words instantly froze the atmosphere, saying Raz had already led his men to kill them. It's then revealed that at the moment of Martin's death, Raz had already noticed that. Due to the symbiosis of the virus ideology, he understood the cause of Martin's death. His fury caused the virus to surge within him, leaving no one alive in the entire lab. Since Raz felt a real threat of death and was worried that Simone would use the same method against him, he swore to eliminate his sister at all costs. Patrick, having overheard their conversation, didn't dare to delay. He ran to the ward to find Phi, who was unconscious. They managed to escape from a pollen company without any issues. The two of them carried a tracking device and knew that Simone was not far away, so they came to warn her as soon as possible. Patrick was devastated about Martin's death, but he didn't have time to grieve. He had to think of a way to deal with the approaching Raz quickly. Raz had already mobilized the few remaining forces of Apollon. Apart from the remaining guards, there were also a few new humans who had been cured by him. But Sarah was somewhat resistant to the purpose of this trip, asking why they had to kill Simone. But Raz was already blinded by fear and hatred. He was convinced that Simone had a way to eliminate the virus and decided that she must be dealt with promptly. They had planned to reach their destination that day, but the damaged road was impassable. Raz made a quick decision to walk to Simone's camp, but seeing Raz's increasingly weak body, everyone slowed down their pace. This gave Simone and the others enough time to prepare. At first, some suggested leaving directly, but considering the miraculous plant was there and might be discovered by Raz, they finally made up their minds to fight against the invading enemy. But the special plant was not yet mature and could not extract the juice to deal with the virus. Daniel's father had no choice but to take out some antidote juice hidden in his daughter's pendant. Now it could finally come in handy. This boosted Simone's confidence, and a perfect defense plan took shape. As long as they could lure Raz alone and use the antidote juice to kill other new humans, there would be nothing to worry about. The first thing they had to do was find a way to separate Raz from his followers. Patrick, remembering the virus's aversion to fire, suggested creating an invisible separation line with gasoline at the abandoned factory. Once everything was ready, their designated sniper, Kira, had also chosen the best ambush spot. The key to their plan was embedding the antidote serum into bullets. When Raz came to the place where Martin was buried with his followers, he tried to motivate everyone again by saying that if they couldn't eliminate Simone, their fate would be the same as his. But his followers were somewhat puzzled, not knowing why Simone was doing this to them. Unable to voice his fear of the virus antidote, Raz could only urge everyone to move on, unaware that Simone and the others were already prepared and waiting for them to fall into the trap. Before long, Raz and his followers arrived at the temporary camp. He seemed to sense that something was off and sent a guard to check the van, while he and the new humans searched the cabin. But traps had been set up everywhere. When a guard approached the van, he saw a pregnant woman inside and was considering whether to act when Patrick suddenly emerged, brandishing a tree branch as a weapon to intimidate the guard. But another guard appeared, putting Patrick in a tragic situation. Meanwhile, Raz searched the cabin without finding anyone. Sarah couldn't help advising Raz not to harm people at will, because that would contradict their initial purpose of saving people. But he was already blinded by hatred and couldn't care less, leaving Sarah heartbroken. She decided to seek comfort from her friend Phi and unknowingly approached the van, where she saw Patrick about to be executed. She called out to stop the guards and scared them away with her virus abilities. Phi sensed something was wrong with Sarah, quickly comforted her by saying that even if they did something wrong, she should try to dissuade them. Simone, hiding near the cabin, felt that the time was right. She purposely revealed herself to draw Raz and his followers to the previously prepared abandoned factory. Everyone there was ready. Sniper Kira tried to calm her nerves, while John was in charge of lighting the fire, planning to use a firewall to separate Raz from his followers. However, Raz wasn't a fool. Seeing Simone and Daniel standing still, he sensed something was off. Soon, a man wearing a hat walked in. He looked very much like Raz. Simone signaled for the plan to begin. John ignited the fire and the prepared trap was activated instantly, isolating Raz from his followers. As the man slowly approached, Simone realized that he wasn't Raz, but it was too late to warn anyone. It turned out that Raz had just found a scapegoat. The entire plan was thrown into chaos. Simone told the others to leave first. She decided to stay and face Raz alone. All the grudges would be settled between the siblings. After entering through another door, Raz soon understood Simone's intention. He ordered his men to chase after Daniel and the others, choosing to stay and settle matters with his sister. However, he overestimated the strength and determination of the new humans. Daniel and his group were quickly cornered by Patient 1 in the restroom, their situation looking dire. Seeing this, John decided to sacrifice himself to buy time for the others to escape. Unexpectedly, Patient 1 was not prepared to inflict harm, but the virus within him erupted uncontrollably. Just in the nick of time, a rocket flew out. It turned out that the surviving child had stepped in. Seizing this opportunity, everyone managed to escape from the restroom. Raz, full of rage, was getting closer. Simone left nothing but silence in her wake. Realizing that the threat to the virus was a flower, Raz was indignant. He couldn't understand why his sister, who once wanted to change him, was now trying to kill him. Simone could only shake her head helplessly. All she had ever wanted was to bring back her obedient brother. Unfortunately, all her efforts had failed. At this moment, Daniel and the new humans rushed in. This only fueled Raz's anger. He scolded his men for their inaction and felt a sense of betrayal. But he didn't realize that these followers were all terminally ill patients who cherished life. Despite all this, Raz was prepared to eliminate Simone, but at the crucial moment, he couldn't bring himself to do it. He remembered how his sister had taken meticulous care of him in the bunker, and how she had separated from her lover for his sake. Deep down, Raz also wanted Simone to return to him. But everything was too late. As if she sensed her fate, Sarah suddenly ran over. They both remembered the promise they had made, to stay together and never be apart. Together, they approached the magical plant. The next moment, a giant energy sphere erupted. After the intense shockwave, the magical plant disappeared. The ashes of the virus floated in the sky. Raz and Sarah had stopped breathing, and along with them, the new humans had also lost their lives. However, the surrounding plants were brimming with life. When Simone and the others returned to the camp, Phi had finally given birth. She and Patrick came out holding the baby, as if heralding the arrival of a new era. Surprisingly, with the destruction of Raz and the magical plant, all viruses in the world also disappeared. Simone and her group walked effortlessly on the abandoned streets. They were filled with hope, firmly believing that they could restore the civilization of the past. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.